It was 2 a.m., and Ibrahim Traoré was still hunched over his desk, the phone ringing off the hook. The president of the central bank, the economy minister, and a handful of top advisors were locked in an emergency meeting, the kind no one ever wants but everyone fears. Then, the breaking news hit like a thunderbolt. French banks had frozen all money transfers to Burkina Faso. The IMF had just suspended loan payments. The CFA franc was being yanked out of the market. The nation's economy could collapse any minute. Traoré slammed his fist down on the table, frustration and fury boiling over. "This is how they've kept us under their thumb for decades," he growled. "Even our own money isn't really ours." Then, locking eyes with his team, he laid out a plan so daring, so audacious, the room went silent. "We can't do this," the finance minister muttered, shaking his head. "No one ever has," Traoré shot back with a sly smile. "Well then, we'll be the first." The tension inside the presidential palace was thick enough to cut with a knife. Outside, the lights of Ouagadougou twinkled peacefully, oblivious to the storm brewing inside. Traoré moved to the window, hands folded behind his back, staring out over the city with a gaze that weighed heavy with thought. "How much do we have in reserves?" he asked without turning around. Dr. Amina Konate, central bank president, flipped through her notes. "Officially, about $400 million, but most of that is locked away in accounts in Paris. We can't touch it," Traoré said grimly. "And the gold?" he pressed. "We have 78 tons registered," she replied, hesitating. "But it's all stored in France," Traoré finished with a bitter laugh. The economy minister shifted in his seat, clearly uneasy. "Mr. President, you have to understand the gravity of this. You're talking about pulling out of the West African Economic Union. Rejecting the CFA franc, it's economic suicide." "Suicide?" Traoré's eyes flashed. "Or liberation? Tell me, Zongo, how can we call ourselves independent when we don't even control our own money? The CFA franc is the last chain of colonialism." Zongo spread his hands. "All of Africa uses this system. Mali, Niger, Senegal. And they're still struggling." Traoré stepped forward, voice low and intense. "Do you know why? Because every time we print a banknote, we have to deposit dollars with the French treasury as collateral. We pay them to use our own money. Is this freedom?" The room went silent. Everyone knew Traoré was right, but it felt like there was no way out. For 70 years, the CFA franc had been the financial leash tying West African countries to France. Independence on paper, but real power still in Paris. Dr. Konate sighed deeply. "Mr. President, we all see the truth, but what can we realistically do? We don't have the infrastructure, no printing presses, no systems to back a new currency." Traoré placed a thick folder on the table. "That's why I've been working on this quietly for 3 months. The advisors leaned in, eyes wide with surprise. "Operation Sankara," he said, voice steady. "Thomas Sankara's unfinished dream. Financial independence," he opened the folder. Inside were detailed blueprints for a new currency to replace the CFA franc, the Burkina gold. "This is impossible," stammered the finance minister. Traoré looked up, eyes blazing. "Then it's time to make the impossible happen. Our foreign exchange reserves aren't enough to sustain us," someone in the room said grimly. President Ibrahim Traoré didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gleaming coin. The room fell quiet. He held it up, a gold-colored disc with a baobab tree on one side and the map of Burkina Faso on the other. "This," he said with a calm grin, "is the prototype of the Burkina gold, pure, made entirely from gold mined right here at home, processed by our own people, on our own soil." Dr. Amina Konate, the central bank chief, looked stunned. "But most of our mines are controlled by foreign companies. They track every ounce we export." Traoré's eyes lit up. "Not anymore." "Wait, what?" The economy minister shot up from his seat. "You nationalized the mines? When? Officially?" "At sunrise," Traoré said, cool as ever. "But the operation started 3 hours ago. As we speak, the army is securing every gold site in the country. French and American executives are being escorted politely to the border." Silence, then disbelief, then awe. It was risky, even reckless, but brilliant. "What about sanctions?" Dr. Konate asked. "Boycotts? You know the West won't take this lightly. They'll come after us." Traoré nodded. Of course, they'll try everything to bring us to our knees. But here's the catch. He walked over and hit a button. A world map lit up on the screen. Several countries were marked. Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, India, Brazil for 6 months, he said. We've been quietly setting up trade deals with these countries. No dollars, no euros, just direct currency swaps. He turned back to the room. We'll sell our gold directly to them. In return, they'll send us tech, food, medicine, everything we need. The economy minister's voice trembled. I had no idea. You weren't supposed to, Traoré said gently. If French intelligence caught even a whisper of this plan, they'd have hit us with sanctions months ago. Dr. Konate reached for the coin, holding it to the light. It's beautiful, she murmured, but will the people accept it? They're used to the CFA franc. Traoré smiled again. People already store gold with jewelers. We're just giving them a chance to use something real, something that holds actual value, instead of paper tied to a foreign government. Then he opened another file. Inside, sleek designs, icons, digital interfaces. This, he said, is the Burkina Wallet, a free app for every citizen, a digital currency backed by gold. Secure, transparent, and completely outside Western banks. The finance minister stared at the screen. This is insane and genius, but how do we convince people to trust it? Just then, Traoré's assistant walked in. Mr. President, the connection is ready. Traoré turned to his team. Convince the people, he said. Let me show you how. The screen lit up. Leaders from 5 African nations appeared. Mali, Niger, Guinea, Togo, Benin. My friends, Traoré said, addressing them with calm determination. We've all seen the news. Once again, the West is using its financial power to try to break us. He paused. But this time, we're ready. And we have a plan. 2 hours later, the mood in the room had completely changed. Fear had been replaced with something powerful resolve. As the first light of dawn crept through the palace windows, President Ibrahim Traoré looked around at his team. Day is breaking, he said quietly. Not just here in Ouagadougou, but across Africa. Dr. Konate closed her laptop, the screen still glowing faintly. Will you make the announcement tomorrow morning? Traoré shook his head. No, I'm doing it now. Before people head to the banks, they deserve to hear the truth. They should feel pride, not panic. Within minutes, the request for an emergency broadcast was cleared. Cameras were set up, lights adjusted. As the crew prepared, Traoré stood alone for a moment, holding the gold coin in his hand. It glinted in the rising sun. Thomas Sankara, he whispered, almost like a prayer. Today, we finish what you started. At exactly 6:30 a.m., just as the people of Burkina Faso were pouring coffee, feeding children, and beginning their day, their televisions and street screens flickered on. President Traoré appeared dressed in his military uniform, calm, grounded, unwavering. People of Burkina Faso, he began, I come before you in these early hours because something important has happened. He paused just long enough for the tension to settle. Last night, French banks and Western financial institutions launched an economic war against our country. They froze our accounts, canceled transfers, cut us off. Across the country in kitchens, cafes, offices, people leaned in. A ripple of concern passed through the streets. Why? Traoré continued. Because we dared to ask for independence. Because we said our resources belong to us. Because we chose to stand tall instead of bowing. He held up the gold coin. The camera zoomed in. Starting today, we are no longer using the colonial CFA franc. We're launching our currency, the Burkina Gold, backed by real, domestic gold, created by our people, for our people. And this is the Burkina Digital Wallet, a free app that every citizen will receive. You don't need foreign banks anymore. Your money will be gold-backed, secured, and right here on your phone. Gasps, silence, then whispers. Some were afraid, but many more felt something different hope. Don't worry, he added, as if speaking directly to each living room across the nation. Your CFA franc savings? They'll be converted into Burkina Gold at double the value. No one loses, everyone gains. A low buzz began to spread through neighborhoods, through markets, and through mobile phones. Excited voices, smiles, even cautious claps. But most importantly, Traoré said, his voice rising, "We will now control our own money. We will write our own future." Then boom, the screen split. One by one, 5 more African leaders appeared beside him. Mali, Niger, Guinea, Togo, Benin, each nodding, each ready. "All of us," said Traoré, "are leaving the CFA franc today, together, at once. We're launching our own gold-backed currencies. This isn't a revolution, it's an evolution, the final step to our true independence. And today, my brothers and sisters, we are finally free." As the broadcast ended, something remarkable began to unfold. There were no bank runs, no panic, no chaos. Instead, people opened their phones and began downloading the Burkina Digital Wallet. It was sleek, easy to use, and it belonged to them. In barbershops and buses, in homes and alleyways, people talked about the coin, the speech, the future. But the biggest shock was still happening thousands of miles away. At 7:45 a.m. Paris time, panic had erupted inside the French central bank. "This is coordinated," muttered the Africa desk executive, his eyes glued to the numbers. 6 countries have left the system, all at once. The bank president slammed his hand on the table. And the digital wallets, the executive swallowed, have already been downloaded millions of times. People are accepting the new currency. There's no panic. The president grabbed his phone. "Get me the Ministry of Finance. Now. We need to start sanctions immediately." But his assistant was already holding out the phone. "They're calling us." A tense voice crackled through the speaker. "The mines are gone, all nationalized, energy agreements canceled." Silence fell over the boardroom. Africa had just made its move, and this time, the game had changed. In Ouagadougou, President Ibrahim Traoré sat silently in his office, eyes fixed on a series of international news reports flooding the screen. As expected, Western media was in full panic mode. West African collapse begins. Economic suicide. Traoré drives his country into famine. The headlines were sensational, predictable. But Traoré wasn't fazed. Because behind the noise, something else was happening, something far more powerful. Messages were coming in from across the globe. Russia, China, India, Turkey, Brazil, South Africa. One after another, they sent congratulations, offers of partnership, and official recognition of the new gold-backed currency. Burkina Faso wasn't isolated. It was being noticed. Just then, Dr. Amina Konaté burst into the room, barely able to contain her excitement. "You won't believe this, Mr. President," she said, beaming. 4 million downloads, the Burkina Wallet app. Traoré leaned back, a quiet smile on his face. "That's nearly 20% of the country," he said. "People have tasted freedom, Amina. They're never going back. And it's not just here," she added, scrolling through data. "We're seeing downloads from Ghana, Congo, Senegal. Everyone's talking about us." The digital revolution had crossed borders. 1 week later, in a small village tucked away from the capital, President Traoré stood in the center of a dusty square surrounded by villagers. An elderly farmer stepped forward, holding up his phone with a hesitant look. "I don't really know how to use this, Mr. President," he said quietly. Traoré smiled and sat beside him on a wooden bench. "Let me show you, father," he said, gently guiding the man's fingers across the screen. "Tap here, your wallet opens. See? That's your Burkina gold balance." The old man stared, his eyes wide. "This is how much my money is worth." This catable's Dalance's father. "Yes," said Traoré, "backed by our gold, mined from our land, stored in your name. No foreign bank can freeze it. No one can touch it. This is your freedom." The farmer clutched the phone to his chest, overcome. "For the first time in my life," he whispered, "I feel like my money is truly mine." That simple sentence said it all. In opening out Marut, this wasn't just about currency. This was about dignity. This was about belonging. Back in the West, experts from the IMF and World Bank had made bold predictions. They won't last a month. The economy will collapse. Confidence will evaporate. But a month passed, then 2. Not only was Burkina Faso still standing its trade, volume was rising. And by the 3rd month, Traoré received an invitation to the BRICS summit in Moscow. The leaders of major emerging economies sat around the table listening intently. Africa wasn't a topic anymore. It was the teacher. "The world abandoned the gold standard over 50 years ago," said the Russian president. Yet here you are bringing it back. Traoré leaned forward, calm and confident. "We're not going backward," he said. "We're moving forward. This isn't just gold. It's digital. It's real. And it's ours. This is next generation independence," said the Chinese leader, leaning forward with genuine interest. "Your digital wallet system, it's not just innovative. It could change the way the world thinks about money." The BRICS summit had just ended, but the ripple effects were only beginning. When news broke about the deals President Ibrahim Traoré had signed, Western headlines lit up in panic. Burkina Faso turns away from the West. Traoré's high-stakes game with Russia, China, India. A new Cold War in Africa. But on the flight home, Traoré was unbothered. Watching the clouds roll beneath him, he turned to Dr. Konate with a calm smile. "We're not turning away from anyone," he said. "We're just turning toward everyone else. We no longer answer to one master. We have partners, plural." On his phone screen, the Burkina Digital Wallet app glowed. The numbers spoke for themselves. 12 million active users, 2 million transactions a day across 6 countries, 0 hacks, 0 outages. This wasn't just a success, it was a revolution. 6 months later, the currency that began in Burkina Faso had now become something bigger, the African gold. 14 African nations had joined the movement, trading in the CFA franc for something they could finally call their own. That old colonial currency, history, done, gone. Ibrahim Traoré was no longer just the president of a single nation. He had become a symbol, a spark for a new African era. One crisp morning in Ouagadougou, a crowd gathered outside a stunning new building. It wasn't just any building. This was the new headquarters of the Central Bank of Burkina Faso. Inside, behind towering gold-plated doors, the country's gold, once held hostage in foreign vaults, was now safely stored on home soil. Traoré stood at the podium. His voice was steady, proud. "We're not just opening a bank," he said. "We're opening a new chapter. Once our gold sat in Paris and London. Today it sits here, where it belongs, with the people who earned it, who own it." Applause erupted, flags waved, but in the back of the crowd, one woman quietly wiped tears from her eyes, not out of sadness, but out of something else, hope. For the first time in generations, Africans weren't just surviving under systems designed elsewhere, they were building their own. Office systems and data programs. The raging generations, she reached out, her voice calm but filled with emotion. She was Thomas Sankara's widow, the wife of Burkina Faso's martyred revolutionary, gunned down in a coup back in 1987. "He would have loved to see this," she said, grasping President Traoré's hand. Financial freedom that was always his greatest dream. Traoré held her gaze and nodded. "We're not doing this alone," he said. "We're standing on the foundation he built. He planted the seeds, we're just helping them grow." Outside the capital, something extraordinary was happening. At the newly launched Burkina Technology Center, a team of young African engineers worked day and night. They weren't just updating the country's digital wallet app, they were rebuilding it from the ground up. The next version was faster, fully blockchain-powered, ultra-energy efficient, and most importantly, entirely designed, built, and secured by Africans. Burkina Faso hadn't just created a currency, it had created a movement. A full-circle ecosystem from the gold in the mines to the tech in people's hands. Meanwhile, in front of flashing cameras, the IMF president struggled to hide his discomfort. "Our dialogue with Burkina Faso and its partners continues," he said with a forced smile. "We are examining their new monetary system." Translation: "We can't stop them anymore. Now we have to deal with them." Across the ocean, the French president was on a PR tour of former colonies. He promised a new relationship, a fresh chapter. But nobody was buying it. At one press conference, an African journalist asked bluntly, "How do you view West Africa's move to a gold-backed currency?" The French leader stiffened. "We respect their decisions, but I must caution there are risks." He didn't even get finished. The room erupted in laughter. The old script no longer worked. 1 year later, United Nations General Assembly. President Ibrahim Traoré stepped up to the podium in New York. No theatrics, no long speech, just facts. A year ago, 6 nations took a leap of faith, he began. Today, 22 African countries use the United African Gold Currency. Our inflation has dropped, our trade has grown, our tech investments have tripled. Western diplomats shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They told us we'd fail, Traoré said, looking out at the chamber. That we'd starve, that we'd collapse. He paused, then smiled. But we didn't argue. We didn't beg. We just went ahead and did it. Thunderous applause filled the room. An African nation had broken free, not just politically but financially, from the chains of colonialism and economic control. And the most powerful part? This was only the beginning.